Happy New Year, everybody! I can't believe it's 2022. Okay, technically I'm filming this on the very last day of 2021, but by the time you see it, it will be 2022. I can't believe the year is over. The time is going by so quickly. Anyway, today I'm going to talk through some basic questions about hiking the Appalachian Trail that seem to come up over and over and over. I'm just out on a little New Year's Eve hike, so I thought this would be a great time to fire up the camera and answer some of those questions. I have answered some of these in past videos, but I know that videos tend to get buried and people don't obviously see all of my videos as much as I would love for you guys to watch all of my videos. I know that's not really the case, so because these questions keep coming up again, I figured that I would answer them once again. So let's get into it, but before we do, please give this video a like, subscribe to my channel if you're interested in more Appalachian Trail, hiking, backpacking, Colorado content, all that good stuff, and check me out over on Instagram at Audie Payne. The link to that will be in the show notes. And by the way, you guys, if you have questions about hiking the Appalachian Trail or just generally hiking or backpacking or anything like that, feel free to drop those in the comments and I will do my best to answer those questions. A lot of times I'll use the shorts videos to answer individual questions, but obviously this one I'm just kind of doing a bunch all at once. But if I miss your question, don't answer it, feel free to drop those in the comments. All right, let's get into it. Okay, question number one. How long does it usually take to complete a thru hike, and what's the timing of a thru hike? So that's really two questions, but they're related, so we're just gonna put it as number one. Okay, so typically it takes people between 5 to 7 months to complete a thru hike. Obviously, if you're in incredible shape and you're an experienced backpacker and hiker and all that, you could definitely do it sooner. I know people that did it in 4 months and some days. They were very fit individuals. I was not one of those people. And some people obviously decide to take their time, take more side excursions, take more rest days, and they might end up doing it in longer than 7 months. But typically it is 5 to 7. It took me about 6 months, 181 days. I love to say it was the best 181 days of my life, despite all of the rain. But it was amazing. And the typical time to begin a thru hike, if you're going northbound, most people start between mid-March and mid-April. That's when the so-called bubble is going northward from Georgia. By the way, the reason that people start the trail so early, like March and April, even though it's still quite cold at that time usually, is because you have a limited amount of time to finish the trail before Katahdin is actually closed. Baxter State Park actually closes down the trails to Katahdin, usually around October 15th. Again, it's weather depending, but you are on a timeline going northbound. You're not just racing to beat the cold weather, but you are racing to actually get to the trail before Katahdin closes down. And if you are a southbounder, typically people start between about June 1st and mid-July. The reason for not starting before June 1st is there can still be a lot of snow and ice way up north in Maine, and they actually don't open the trails to Katahdin until around June 1st. It does depend on the year and the weather when they actually open those trails, but typically around June 1st. And then they typically, I saw a lot of southbounders starting later, like later August when I was going northbound. That's not the norm though, and I very much question the sanity of those particular southbounders, because if you're gonna think it's probably gonna take you about 6 months to complete the trail, do you wanna be completing the trail in the dead of winter? Because I wouldn't. I hate the cold though. But maybe if you are a very experienced winter hiker, you love the cold, you think you can handle it, you might want to start later. But I wouldn't recommend it. Not that I've done the trail southbound, but just looking at, it gets very, very cold down south. People think it's going to be, all sunny and warm and whatever. Even in the early spring when I started, I started March 20th, so I guess that's the very, very tail end of winter, beginning of spring. It was extremely cold in Georgia. My coldest night on the trail was like 6 degrees, and I was absolutely freezing, even though I was prepared for cold weather. So, yes, there's my answer to that question. Question number 2. how much does it cost to complete a thru hike of the Appalachian Trail? Okay, I just want to preface this by saying that this does not take into account our recent inflation. I know that inflation has been going up at high levels, so perhaps the cost will be going up a little bit. But typically over the past few years, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy says it will cost you about $1,000 per month that you're on trail. So if you're on trail for 5 to 7 months, that's $5,000 to $7,000 of on-trail expenses. So this does not include your gear, your bills back home, the money you're gonna need to jumpstart your life after the trail, if you're not going back to a job or going back to retirement or all that good stuff. And the Trek, which is a website dedicated to long distance backpacking, does these thru-hiker surveys every year. And one of the questions they ask is, how much money did you spend on trail? And apparently the answer for the AT, which is supposedly a little cheaper than the PCT, is that people tend to spend between $3,500 and $6,500 the entire time you're out there on trail expenses. I tend to think $3,500 is probably pretty low. Certainly it can be done, and it can be done for cheaper. People always ask me that too, like, you know, could this be done cheaper? And the answer is, of course, yes. It greatly depends on your lifestyle on trail, how often you're going into towns, how often you're staying in towns, how often you're eating at restaurants and getting beer, and if you're doing side excursions and all that good stuff. But I've also heard the owner of the Trek, Zach Davis, say that he thinks people are kind of lowballing their expenses in those surveys. So who knows, but that at least gives you an idea of how much money you're going to need. And if you don't have a lot of extra money to spend, if you're, you know, kind of at the lower end of that range, I would suggest that you be sure to make a budget and stick to it, because one of the big reasons that people get off trail, besides injury, is that they run out of money. So, you know, don't think like, oh, okay, well, people say $3,500, so I'm gonna save $3,500 and that's it, and I'll be fine. Well, you might be if you're good at budgeting, for sure, but also take into account you could end up with something out of your control, like an injury, and you might need to bunk up in a hostel for a couple weeks while you're recovering from said injury. So you're gonna need to take into account that extra money, and the money if you know, actually something goes very wrong, like, I mean, a serious injury, or a piece of your gear breaks and you have to replace it. So I think that you should have more money than the minimum you think you need. That's my 2 cents. Question number 3, can you bring a dog with you while you're hiking the Appalachian Trail? Yes, you can. There are a couple places on the trail that dogs are not allowed. I believe the only places are the Great Smoky Mountains in, obviously, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Baxter State Park in Maine, where the trail ends. Katahdin is in Baxter State Park. So in those 2 places, you cannot have a dog. I've heard in the Smokies there are places that will board your dog for you while you're there. They'll come pick up your dog, and I think give you a ride, or give the dog a ride back to the trail. Obviously, you're gonna pay for this service, but that's a way to get around it in the Smokies. I did see multiple dogs while I was out there. I will say most of the dogs that I met did not seem to be doing that well. I think that it was really stressful for them. It was really tough on them to be hiking all day, every day. But I did see a couple of dogs, service dogs actually, who seemed to be doing really well and seemed to be healthy and happy. So certainly it can be done. And if you have your heart set on bringing your dog, I'm not certainly going to tell you not to bring your dog. Just maybe have a backup plan in case the dog isn't doing well. You know what I mean? I mean, you get out there, your dog's loving it, your dog's healthy, great. But if something happens, you know, your dog gets an injury or it's just not doing very well, maybe have a backup plan, someone who might be willing to watch your dog for the remainder of the trail or for part of the trail or something like that. Question number 4, how do you take showers, do laundry, resupply on food, all that jazz? So the logistics of a thru hike are really not as complicated as they seem before you actually get out there, because once you get out there, you just figure it out as you go, and there are so many other people hiking the trail that can help you along your way. If you have questions, someone else is likely going to know the answer. There are lots of people that get out and do sections every year. There are lots of people that hike the trail multiple times. And there are lots of people that are just really good at research. So once you get out there, it's pretty easy to figure out. You're probably going to use a navigation system like Gut Hook, which is now called Far Out, or AWOL, or something like that. And those navigation systems will tell you where the towns are and how far they are and what gaps you might want to stop at, what roads you want to stop at in order to get to those towns. So usually you're either going to walk into a town, or you're going to hitchhike into a town, or you're going to call a shuttle ahead to pay to take you to town. So those are all your options. Obviously, some towns are farther away from the trail than others. Sometimes the trail goes right through the town. Sometimes you really gotta either commit to some serious miles to get there walking, or you're gonna wanna take a shuttle or hitchhike. But, you know, these systems, again, they tell you where the hotels and hostels are, which ones have laundry, where in the community you might be able to pay for a shower, like sometimes community centers or gyms, where the grocery stores are, all of that good stuff. I think by far the most popular one now is Far Out. I used AWOL on the AT, but I've since used Far Out for parts of the Colorado Trail. It's amazing because it's interactive. It tells you exactly where you are on the trail, shows you your elevation as you go, all that good stuff. Whereas when I had AWOL, it was just a book. Very old school, but it did the job and I really liked it. On future trails, I'll definitely be using Far Out though, for sure. But yeah, so you just sort of look at those things and it will tell you where the towns are, what's your best bet in getting to town, and once you are in town, where those different stops are that you're going to want to make. So when I was out there, it's not like I went out there and I was like, okay, I have to plan my whole route for the AT in advance. No, you kind of plan from town to town to town. You're like, okay, I want to stop in this next town. It's this many miles away. Here's how many days I think it's going to take me to get there. Always bring a little extra food just in case you do end up needing some extra rest or it takes you longer than you think. And you just plan for that next town and where you're going to go in that next town. So it's really not a big deal. It's just break it into little pieces and it's easy to figure all of that out. Question number 5. I think I'm on question 5. We'll just say I'm on question 5. Do people lose a lot of weight out on the AT? So this varies quite a bit from individual to individual. My information on this is all anecdotal, just from what I saw. Some people lost a lot of weight. Those individuals tended to be overweight men, to be perfectly honest. And I saw a lot of people, mostly women, who lost very little weight. Their body shapes change, you know, like mine for sure did. So I lost 13 pounds total. Not from the start to the end of the trail. It was like I had lost 13 pounds and then I ended up gaining some back in Maine because I put on so much muscle, because the terrain in New Hampshire and Maine is really difficult, the most difficult of the entire trail in my opinion. So from start to finish, I only lost 8 pounds, but my body changed drastically. I just got so toned. I got thin, I got toned. I looked really healthy. I didn't feel that healthy, mostly because I had anemia, which I didn't know at the time. But I knew a lot of men who lost a great deal of weight. Some men who didn't lose any. I definitely knew a couple of guys who didn't tend to lose any weight. But from what I saw, it was like men would lose a lot of weight and they would lose it quite quickly. Like I knew a guy who lost 5 pounds the first week on the trail. I didn't lose, like 2 months in, I had lost 2 pounds. And I knew several other women that this was the same for. So, I mean, I think it definitely depends on your metabolism and what your body wants to do. And you can't control it because you know you got to feel your body while you're out there. I'm in the school of thought that, like, I definitely have struggled in the past with my relationship with food, for sure. But, oh, there's a big loud boom out here. I don't know what that was. Weird. Anyway, I'm of the school of thought that like once you're out there and you're using your body, you're working it so hard every day, like you're not worried about the calories that you're getting in terms of wanting to lose weight. You might be worried about the calories you're getting in terms of like, I don't want to lose any more weight or I want to fuel my body. But you very quickly realize that the purpose of food is to fuel your body, is to push you up and over mountains all day, every day. And it's like, when you get hungry on trail, you are hungry on trail. At least for me, there was no stopping it. And it's like, I would crave certain foods. Like I was so into gummies for a while. My body was constantly like, give me those gummies. I need some more of those. So I would say, if you're going out there to lose weight, maybe reframe that. Maybe go out there to challenge yourself physically and just see what happens, because regardless of what happens with your weight, you are going to get stronger and you're going to accomplish all these things, and it's just going to be an amazing experience. And hopefully you won't be worrying about the weight loss once you're out there and in the long run, because you will be so proud of what your body is accomplishing. At least that's how I felt. So yeah. Question number 6. Could I go the entire trail without bringing a tent or a hammock? Could I just sleep in shelters the whole way? I think technically you could, but it would be a huge pain in the butt. Because the shelters are, spaced out a certain distance. You'd be really held to a certain number of miles every day, whether it was like fewer than you wanted to do or more than you wanted to do. Whereas there's so much more freedom if you have a tent or hammock. You can, there's campsites that don't have shelters. You can stealth camp. There's other options besides just being held to the standards of staying at that shelter. And a lot of people end up hiking with other people. They find a hiking partner or they hike with a trail family. And I feel like if you're doing that, hiking with other people, they're not going to want to be held to like, oh, we have to stay at shelters every single night because this person doesn't have a tent or a hammock. And then of course sometimes you get to the shelters and they're full, and sometimes it's not even just thru hikers, but like scout groups or campfire groups or church groups, that sort of thing. So it's not like you can get to the shelter and be like, yo, you need to move because I'm not prepared and didn't bring a tent. So yeah, I would not recommend going out to the AT without a tent or a hammock. Question number 7. What are the ages of most people who are thru hiking the AT? Okay, so this is also anecdotal. I'm sure there's some data out there. The Trek, I'm sure, has something from their thru hiker surveys, but from my experience, what I saw was mostly it is 20-somethings and retired men, but there's all ages out there. I met kids. The oldest person I met on trail was an 87-year-old man. I was 33, 34 when I did the trail, and I met several other 30-somethings. I know some of them had different experiences than me and said that they did not meet a lot of other people in their 30s, but I did. I met quite a few. I feel like I met people from every decade, but I'd probably say besides children, the 40-somethings were the ones that I saw the fewest of. I did meet some 40-somethings, for sure, but my theory on that is that 40-somethings are raising children and working on their careers. So it must be a tough decade for them to get out there. I'll probably be out on trails in my 40s though, so hopefully I meet some other 40-somethings then. But yeah, the largest group's definitely 20-somethings, more 20-something men than women, but certainly both, and recently retired men. I did meet a couple of recently retired women, but mostly it was men. And I feel like the men who are about to retire and they've been waiting to go do the trail, I hear from them a lot, and they say like, am I gonna be like alone out there? Are there other people my age? And yes, there are so many people out there your age. But also, I feel like people form these groups on the trails, friend groups, and become friends with people who are not only in their age group. It's actually something I really, really love about the community. I feel like in quote unquote real life, you're kind of pushed into these groups that are like just people around your age, and that's who you hang out with, right? For the not always, but for the most part. But on the trail, you can be friends with people of all ages because you just immediately have so much in common with them. You know, I feel like they say, oh, you can be friends with people who are at the same life stage as you, that are doing the same things in life as you. Obviously, if you're both hiking the trail, you're at the same life stage. So age doesn't really matter, in my opinion, or at least it matters far less than it does in the real world. Next question, is it safe to hike the AT alone? And okay, yes, there are bad people everywhere. Bad things can happen anywhere. So nowhere is completely and totally safe at all times. But the AT is an incredibly safe place, especially when you compare it to, you know, major cities. It's both statistically very safe and it feels very safe because there is a really strong community out on the AT, and thousands of people attempt through hikes every single year. Most of them go northbound. Most of them start between mid-March and mid-April. And so when you're like, you get to a shelter or campsite the very first night on trail, there's probably going to be 50 other people there if you're hiking at the normal time going northbound. So it's not like you're out there by yourself. If you start the trail solo, you might even meet people before you actually get on the trail. If you start at Amicalola Falls State Park, there are rangers and volunteers there that will give talks and give you shakedowns and give you encouragement, all that jazz. And there are tons of other people starting there at the same time as you. I met people like before I even started the trail. It's so easy. And then once I started on the approach trail, I met several more people. And then once I got to Springer Mountain Shelter, I met several more people. And I just felt like I was meeting people constantly along the AT, and I made so many friends out there. It was so easy. Like, I did go with a friend, Ibex, who was my friend from college, but we weren't close at that time. Like, we had studied abroad together in college, which was like 12, 13 years prior to us actually starting our hike, and we'd only seen each other through a few times since. And I'm really glad that I went with her because now we're really, really close friends, and she's going to be in my life forever, and we're probably going to do more long hikes together. But had she not been there, it would have been totally fine, because I mean, we even picked up a friend our very first night at the shelter who ended up hiking with us for over a month afterwards and just became one of our closest friends on the entire trail. Shout out to Girl Scout. And yeah, it's easy to make friends out there, easier than you would think. You're not going to go out, if you're going at the normal time northbound, you're not going out for an isolated wilderness experience, however much you might think you are. There are many friends to be had, many friends to be had. And also down south, I feel like there's tons of trail angels, and the communities are very used to hikers and really support hikers. So you're not going to be alone on your journey, even if you start solo. Last question. Okay, I don't really get this question directly, but I feel like I get it a lot indirectly. The question is, do I have to have the lightest and most expensive gear in order to complete a thru hike successfully? And the answer is absolutely not. I've seen people with super old, heavy gear make it all the way to Katahdin, and I've seen people with the lightest, most expensive, most up-to-date gear not even make it past the first week. So I think that, like, I didn't have the lightest, most expensive gear. I did suffer a little more than I needed to, probably because of that. My gear was definitely heavier than it needed to be, and I've since changed that out because I've had the means to do that. But I made it all the way to Katahdin with my heavy gear, so lots of other people do the same. People have been using much heavier gear for decades, making it all the way. And trust me, having the lightest, most expensive gear doesn't give you grit. It's definitely not a guarantee that you're gonna make it all of the way. I think it's determination and luck and finding a community on the trail and just being grateful for what you have out there and what you're getting to experience. So I think more so than focusing on having the lightest gear, if you can't necessarily afford it, you should focus on your reasons for being out there and find the joy in every single day on trail. Find something to be grateful for every single day, even when it's pouring down rain and you're freezing, or you're super hot, or you're covered in bug bites, or your knees aching, or your foot's aching, or the terrain is much harder than you thought it was going to be, or any of that stuff. just figure out why you're there, what your reasons are for being there, and what you can be grateful for and joyful for in that moment. Yeah, so that's my take. Anyway, those are all the questions I'm going to answer today. But like I said, if you have more questions that I didn't answer, I'd be happy to answer those either in the comment section or via a short video. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm excited for what 2022 has to bring. And I hope you'll come along this year for the ride as well. Happy New Year, everybody. See y'all later.